Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be sewing along to my new summer pattern, Simplicity 9142. Let's get started. If you're new to sewing, I have an online sewing and design school called Sew It Academy with a free trial that you can check out right now. If you already sew but maybe need a refresher course, you can follow along with the Sewing Basics video linked in the description box below. Watch that video and then come sew along with me. All right guys, so you're going to need pattern 9142. You have view A and view B. There are a few options that you have, like the sleeve, so you can choose whatever sleeve you want, either the flutter sleeve or the pleated sleeve. You can also choose to have the front drape or not have this front drape here. And then the other change is the length. So this is full length and this is mid calf. So those are the only differences between both designs. So you can choose what sleeve you're going to cut and what length you're going to cut and whether or not you want to do your front drape. Also remember that on the back of the pattern envelope, you have a list of notions and suggested fabrics for you to choose from. All right, let's go over all the pattern pieces you need to cut. Okay, for this sew along, I'm gonna be choosing to do the flutter sleeve, which is sleeve B, and this is pattern piece 11. You're only doing one sleeve, so you're only cutting one. You're going to be cutting out pattern piece number 8 and pattern piece number 9. You're cutting one of each out of fabric and one each of interfacing. This is your front and back facings. You're going to cut out pattern piece number 5. This is your pocket. You're going to cut 4. If you're choosing to do the front drape, you're going to cut pattern piece number 7 and you're going to cut 2. Remember that this is cut also on the bias. Okay, for the front and the back, you're cutting out 4 pieces. You're cutting out one piece for your left front. Please make sure that you transfer all of your dots and your markings. It's really important for this pattern because as you're putting it together, you can easily get confused. So make sure that you do your notches, mark all of your dots, and that you're placing your pattern piece right side up as you're cutting each piece because these are individual pieces. This is one cut for the left front. This is pattern piece 1, which is the right front. You're also going to cut 1, and please make sure and transfer all of your dots and your markings. And you're gonna go ahead and cut out pattern piece number 3, which is the right back, and you're also cutting 1. Once you have everything cut and interfaced and clearly marked, we can start sewing. All right guys, I'm probably gonna keep reminding you to make sure that you're working with the right side and the right pattern piece because, take it from me, this can get a little confusing if you don't mark everything. So as you can see, I still have my pattern piece actually pinned to my fabric and I'm not taking it out until I start to sew that piece. That way I know exactly what I'm looking at and I won't make any mistakes sewing the wrong side to the wrong side. So we're gonna start with the right pieces, meaning the right side of your body. So the right front and the right back. Pattern piece 1 and pattern piece 3. So let's go ahead and grab pattern piece 1. I'm going to set pattern piece 3 aside for just a second. And on your instructions, you're going to see that they show you how to put your princess seams together so that you can create your pleat. So that's what we're going to do for the front, right front, and for the left front. So I'm going to go ahead and take my pattern piece off. So with right sides facing, right, the right side is facing me, I'm going to fold it onto itself. And you're going to first pin at your notch. Okay, so you have 2 notches. And then what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that your dots are aligned, they're matching. And I'm just going to pin through where my dot is and where my bottom dart, making sure it's at the same place underneath. That way I know exactly where to stop. So just as if you were doing a princess seam, you're going to stitch, back stitch at the top, you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you're going to continue following your dots, okay? That's going to create the pleat. Okay, so I've stitched this together. Now what you're going to do to create the pleat is you're going to lay it flat, and I've already sort of pressed mine. You're going to open up that pleat. You're going to match your dot to your dot, okay? So it should be 2 dots that you see there. You're going to go ahead and pin, okay, and you're going to stitch across so that you can create your pleat. Now we're going to go ahead and stitch across this, give it a good press. You're gonna end up with a beautiful pleat on the other side. And you're gonna grab pattern piece 3. This is the right back. You're gonna do the same thing that we did with 1. You're going to match and pin together your notches. You're going to bring together your dots, and you're going to stitch in the same way that we did pattern piece number 1. You're going to press and open out your pleat and stitch across the same way. Once we have 1 and 3 together, we'll go ahead and pin and stitch together at the inseam. Okay, so I have created my pleat in pattern piece number 3. I've gone ahead and stitched down both of my pleats for pattern piece number 1 and 3. Now I'm going to lay them with right sides facing, and we're going to pin our inseam. So you're going to go ahead and match your notch. Okay, go ahead to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch your inseams together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I went ahead and pressed my inseam open. Now, you guys know that for the sake of the tutorials and time, I don't serge on camera, but for this particular pattern, I did realize when I made it the first and second time for the pattern envelope that it was much easier to serge the individual seams long before you start stitching anything together. So if you want to serge all of your seams, including these, I would do it before you start to pin and sew. I just found it to be a little easier, although you could still do it now. Okay, so now that we have 1 and 3 together at our inseam, we have the right side of our jumpsuit attached. You're gonna do the same thing for pattern piece number 2 and 4. And it's the same thing. You're going to pin together your notches, make sure that your dots are aligned. You're going to stitch in the same way. You're going to create your pleat the same way, and you're going to attach at the inseam 2 to 4. Once you've done that, we can go ahead and move on. All right, guys, so I went ahead and finished off the left front and back, right? Same way, pleats the same way, inseam the same way. Now we're gonna continue working on the left front and back, which is pattern piece 2 and 4, okay? We're gonna go ahead and attach our pocket. So the pocket is attached differently for the right than it is for the left side because we have a side seam zipper. So that's why we're gonna go ahead and start with the left. So grab 2 of your pockets, and with the right side of the fabric facing you, you're gonna place your pockets right sides facing. Make sure to align your notch. You should have a notch, and pin it in place. You're going to do the same thing to the other side of your left. So you have a left front and a left back. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to stitch our pockets down using 3/8 of a seam allowance. Okay, you're going to do that for both your left front and your left back. All right, guys, once you have your pockets attached to the left front and your left back, go ahead and press it so that your seam allowance is pressed towards your pocket. Now we're going to go ahead and lay right sides facing, lay your pocket over itself just like this. We have our inseam here so you're not confused at what you're looking at. And now we're going to go ahead and stitch together the side seam of our left front and left back. So I'm going to go ahead and put some pins. I'm going to pin around my pocket. Now you should have 2 dots, right? You should have a dot here and a dot here where you have your pocket opening. So what we're going to be doing is once we're finished pinning down the entire side seam, you're going to stitch starting at the top and back stitching using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to stitch down to your first dot, and you're going to back stitch, and then you're going to break your thread and start again at the following dot, back stitch, and then work your way down to the hem of your jumpsuit. After we've done that, then we'll go ahead and close out our pocket opening. Okay, so I've gone ahead and stitched, leaving my pocket opening. So I stitched down, back stitched at my first dot, started again back stitching at this dot all the way down to my hem, and then I stitched around my pocket. So now that I'm finished with the left side, I'm gonna go ahead and grab the right front and back and 2 more pocket pieces. All right, guys, so we're going to go ahead and grab one pocket, we're going to be working on the right front, okay? So the right front and the right back look kind of similar. You'll see from sort of this slant here, right? So just to make sure, the right back should have 3 slits, right? 3 little notches that you cut into along the center back. And the right only has 2. So you want to make sure that you're pinning your pocket to the right pattern piece, because it's going to make a huge difference when we attach that pocket. So again, working on the right front, you're going to grab your pocket, right sides facing, go ahead and pin. Okay, so what we're going to do for this side is you're going to be stitching using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance from dot to dot. All right, guys, so we're going to, again, be stitching from dot to dot using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So back stitch the beginning of your dot and at the end of the dot. Okay, now we're going to cut through our fabric. So what you're going to be doing is you're going to cut into your seam allowance right at the dot. Now we're going to go ahead and understitch. So you're going to place your pocket to the right side of you. And making sure that your seam allowance is towards your pocket, we're going to understitch from dot to dot. Now what I want you to do is I want you to fold this to the inside just like this. And we're going to go ahead and give this a press. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pressed my pocket so it's going to look, or it should look, just like this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take the other pocket and we're going to place it right behind it. So I'm going to turn this back over to the wrong side. And we're going to place it over the top just like this, right? So in essence, when you turn it around, it'll look like this. And here's the pocket opening. Now the reason we do that is because, again, we're going to be attaching the zipper to this side, and so we need to make sure that we have seam allowance for that zipper. So what you're going to do now is I like to pin just to keep it together while I'm at the machine. And now you're going to go to your sewing machine, moving the jumpsuit completely out of the way first. You're just going to stitch closed your pocket. Okay, so I have gone ahead and stitched my pockets together, right? Just the pockets, not attached to the jumpsuit. But now it's sort of just laying loose, so I want to stitch them together. So just along the pocket edge, maybe just 3/8 of an inch seam, I'm just going to stitch these so that they're not moving. And then at the very top. Okay, now once you have that, you have a finished pocket. All right, now that we have our pockets done, you'll notice that I'm not having you sew your side seam together for the right side because we still need to do our zipper. But before we do that, I want to go ahead and join the right side to the left side of the jumpsuit along the center front, center back, and the crotch area. So with right sides facing, I've turned my left piece out so that the right side is facing me. I'm going to pin first at the crotch, right at the inseam. So matching inseam to inseam, I'm going to pin. And then we have the center front. You should have 2 notches. So I'm going to go ahead and pin that. And then I'm going to pin a couple more times in between. And then you're going to pin your center back seam. You should have 3 notches that you either snipped or marked. And now we're going to go ahead and stitch that in one continuous seam. So You can go ahead and put one leg inside the other to make it easy. We're gonna go ahead and starting at the top of the center back or center front, you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance along the center back, down the curve of the crotch, and then up the other side. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and work on our drape. So you have two, one for the front, one for the back. What you're going to do is you're just going to fold it wrong side facing, the right side is facing you. And you're going to just baste these together, okay? So you're going to baste across the sides, across the top, and down the other way, just like I've done here. So it's all one piece folded, and now we're gonna go ahead and pleat it. So once you've done that, grab your pins. You should have marked where your pleats are gonna be so that it's easier for you to do it, because you have to do it for both the front and the back. So you're just gonna bring one line or one dot, because I just marked my lines, to meet, and then you're going to do the same thing with your other lines or dots, however you chose to mark it. And then one final pleat. And then you're going to do the same thing on the other side. So I'll show you how I mark mine just so you guys can see. You can either choose to make small snips where you see your pleat lines are gonna be, or I just make a little dot. So I make a dot wherever one line, whenever one solid line is gonna meet a broken line. And then I just bring them together the same way that we did on the other side and pin. Then after you have it pinned, then I just go to the sewing machine and I stitch this down just to make sure my pleats don't come undone. You're gonna do the same thing to the other drape piece. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and attach our drape to both the front and the back. So I'll just show you how to do one and then you can do the other. So the narrower part goes up towards the shoulder, and you'll know that because you should have a notch here on the wider side and also a notch on your actual front. So you're gonna align that and pin. And I'm gonna pin my side because we're gonna baste this down. And then matching your dots, you're gonna go ahead and pin the other side. Okay, now you're gonna do the same thing to the other side. Make sure to align your notch and your dots. You're gonna pin the same way, and then you're going to baste across the sides, the top, and across your shoulder. All right, guys, so what we're gonna do now is after you've attached your drapes to the front and the back, we're gonna go ahead and do our zipper. So if you have watched any of my tutorials with a zipper, you should be able to do this blindfolded by now because we've done it a lot. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pin your entire side seam the way I've done here. I'm gonna start at the hem, and what I do is using a regular 2.5 length stitch, I stitch back stitching at the end, working my way up until where the zipper is gonna end. So I have a big dot here so that I know that's where my zipper ends. I'm gonna back stitch there, break my thread, and then I'm gonna baste from this point up to the top using the longest stitch available on your machine. So for me, it's a 5.0. Okay, so I went ahead and stitched from the hem up to where my zipper is gonna stop and then basted, like I said. From that point to the top, I've pressed the seam open. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin our zipper to one side. So I always buy an extra long zipper because I like to make sure that my zipper pull is completely out of the way. So I first align the end of the zipper where my dot is, probably about, I don't know, maybe 3 inches or so, just so I have enough space to work. And then usually I have, I don't know, about 3 or 4 inches of overhang. Honestly, you just need maybe 2 inches. So if you have a zipper that overhangs about 2 inches, that's fine too. I just like to be able to work without my zipper pull in the way. And so what you're gonna do is you're going to pin the zipper tape to one seam allowance and only the seam allowance. So I align the middle of my zipper with that seam, and I'm just gonna pin. Depending on what fabric you used, you may have some bulk here in this area, right? Because we have that drape and then the pleats and everything. So if you need to trim it, you can. Okay, now you're gonna go to the sewing machine and you're gonna baste one side down, okay? You're gonna baste it, then you're going to turn it over and pin the other side. So I'm just gonna do that all here so that I can take it to the sewing machine and show you guys at one time. Okay, let's head over to the sewing machine. Okay, making sure that you're only working on your seam allowance, we're just gonna go ahead and baste this down. Okay, now you're gonna turn this around and you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I want you to go back and I want you to remove your basting stitch from the top all the way down to where your dot was. Okay, you're gonna go ahead and open your zipper up and you're going to now be stitching pretty close to your zipper tape. So I'm gonna go back to a normal end stitch and I'm gonna be stitching pretty close and then sort of just opening my coil a bit as I stitch. Back stitch at the beginning. Okay, and then working from the top down, you're gonna do the same thing on the other side. All right, guys, once you have your zipper tape sewn, you can go ahead and close your zipper, and you'll notice you'll have your pocket opening, which is always a really nice detail. Now we're gonna go ahead and work on our facing. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and grab 8 and 9 right sides facing. We're going to lay them over each other. You should have a notch on both 8 and 9. So you're gonna align those. And you're gonna pin. Now you're just gonna stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, then press your seam open. Okay, so we've gone ahead and pressed our seam open. Set this aside for just 1 second. Before we attach it, I want you to make sure that you stitch your shoulder seams together. So with right sides facing, align your notch at your shoulder and stitch across using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, so with right sides facing, now that we have our shoulders sewn together, we're gonna go ahead and place the facing, matching up the shoulder seam first, and then matching up your notches. Okay, now that it's pinned in place, you're gonna head to your sewing machine and you're going to stitch this down. You're gonna stitch this down to the zipper tape. Then you're going to stitch across the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then you're going to close the other end the same way. Okay, once your facing is stitched down, go ahead and cut into your corner. You can cut off that extra zipper tape that's hanging out. And what you can do now is head over back to your sewing machine and you want to understitch because you want your facing to stay to the inside. So with your seam allowance, press it first with your seam allowance towards your facing. Go ahead and understitch all the way around. And then what you can do is you can poke out your corners and then press your facing to the inside. Okay guys, once you have your facing pressed and understitched, you can set that aside. We're gonna go ahead and work on our sleeve. So with right sides facing, you're gonna go ahead and stitch your underseam. So using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, go ahead and pin, match your notch, and stitch. Again, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pressed my underarm seam flat. Go ahead and do 2 rows of easing stitches along the sleeve cap, and then you're going to use that to pull and ease the sleeve cap onto our jumpsuit. I'm just gonna pull just a tad. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna start to pin, and we're going to match our underarm seams first to the side seam of our jumpsuit, and I'm gonna pin. And I'm going to match my notches And I'm gonna go ahead and pin my dot to my shoulder seam. Go ahead, continue pinning. If you need to ease your sleeve cap in some more, just go ahead and pull on your threads. Okay, once you have it pinned, you're going to go ahead, head to your sewing machine. You're going to stitch around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, guys, now that you've attached your sleeve, the only thing left for you to do is to finish the hem of your sleeve and to finish the hem of your jumpsuit, and you are all done. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this sew along. If you're not following me on Instagram already, please follow @MimiGStyle. Until next time, peace.